This is Me, I Am Mental, the podcast. A quick disclaimer. The content you find here is neither intended to be therapy or diagnosis. It is provided for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only.
Welcome to another episode of Me, I'm Mental. In this podcast, we discuss all things mental. My name is Charles Adede.
And my name is Darren Collins, and today we have a special guest, Rodhah Kithure, who is a clinical psychologist who's going to give us a little bit of insight into the state of mental health in the world, but also specifically here in Kenya. But before we get to that, we would like to ask you to help us out, not financially, but just in terms of getting this podcast going. This is one of the early episodes, and so just liking, subscribing, you know what to do, and finding us on all the platforms. meiammental.me is probably the central clearinghouse location for all the things you can get to, whether it's LinkedIn or Twitter or Instagram or Facebook. But meiammental.me is a great place to go, but otherwise subscribe and kindly send to your friends, and that'll help us get going. So let's get going.
Thank you, Darren. So today we're very excited to be hosting Rodhah Kithure, who is a clinical psychologist. We will get to know a lot more about her in due course. She has an interesting personal story. Most of us tend to imagine that when that people in the mental health space, the professionals in the mental health space, may not be having stories or experiences which are personal to them, and which so when you're speaking with a mental health professional, sometimes you think they don't really know your story. But I think that may not be the case. I think some of these mental health professionals have a real experience, which is well worth sharing. And I'm glad that Rodhah is willing to share her journey with us as well. Because here at Me, I'm Mental, that's what we are trying to do. We are trying to make sure that the conversations around mental health are real. The people know that the people they're relating are relatable to all the stakeholders. So thank you very much, Rodhah.
Thank you too.
Rodhah is very well qualified to be in this space. We will get to that in due course. But firstly, Rodhah, I'd like you to just give us a brief background, your story, who you are. More specifically, I'd like you to, I know you've shared with me a bit about growing up in a family setting where you had a sibling who had mental health challenges, and that experience shaped your life very fundamentally, not just your life, but the lives of those around you. So perhaps you could start, that's a good place to start this conversation today. Karibu sana, Rodhah.
Asante sana. Thanks, Darren.
Sure.
Thanks, Charles. Yes, as you've said, my background and my experience have shaped my interest in mental health, in addressing mental health issues. My brother, late, I passed away last year on February. He has struggled for a long time, and for us, it's the kind of illness you don't notice. And in a society where we don't much talk about it, and for men, not talking about it, in a community where even speaking about mental illnesses is still a taboo in some areas, for us, we couldn't understand it. He was a very intelligent young man, very bright in our family. We used to say he won the genetic
The genetic lottery?
Yeah, lottery, that one, because was very smart, was at the top of his class, but along the way, got into a lot of trouble in high school, conduct issues, and by the end he's finishing high school, got into university, college actually, and got into drugs, struggled with substance use, and by the time he was passing, he was murdered, and he lived a very troubled life, and we really tried to intervene, but we couldn't be able to. And that for me was the curiosity of how could someone who was very bright, someone doing so well, and then all of a sudden things just changed and we couldn't understand. And by the time I'm understanding what the problem is, it was in a place where it was irreversible. So there my interests, I got interested in understanding, and even my interest in clinical, because I wanted to dig deeper and know, is there a way we can help? And since I couldn't be able to help him, I got into helping others, and focus got into prevention, because prevention is key. By the time they get into treatment, it's usually very problematic in treatment. So for me, I focused into prevention methods. How can you actually spot the issues? How can you educate people into understanding about mental illnesses?
So perhaps just to step back a bit and delve a little more into your brother's story. So this was your elder brother?
Yeah.
Is it the eldest in the family?
No, he's the second born. We have 5 children, so he's the second born in the family.
Yes. And so you were young and you're noticing all this drama unfolding before you and some of the things he was doing. And generally, how was it growing up with in that space at that time? How was it for your siblings, for your parents?
Emotionally, it was draining. For my parents, you'd see even for them, they're trying to understand how to help. And for parenting, you bring in discipline. And every time you'll find a way. It was very smooth in how you operated. You'll never be caught. You'll never take responsibility. If you don't see him making the mistake, he will not own up to it. So you find all of us, we are getting in trouble because of him. Until now, later, when he came to Nairobi, all of us grew up in a country. So when later he came to Nairobi, by the time now he got in trouble with the law, that's when now we could see, everybody now could see clearly. He was always the troublemaker, but you'll find a way to avoid being caught. And even when he was caught, he'll find a smooth way of getting out of trouble. That's how we used his intelligence. So it was emotionally draining. My parents, it was, they tried. They really tried, but even on their level, they couldn't understand what was going on. Because of the shift in one day is the most obedient, disciplined child, and the next, things just changed. So for us, it was emotionally draining. Till the time he died, it was for all of us. It took a toll on us. Even for us, sometimes you're taking him even to see, and the kind of illness he was struggling with, mental illness, is the kind where he'll never admit I have a problem. For him, everybody else around had a problem, not him. So it was very hard for any person to help him.
How did it manifest, like emotionally? Like how? Because you kind of said like it's one of these things that's almost hidden. You wouldn't know he had a mental illness.
Yeah.
So how did it manifest itself, if you don't mind?
Right now, we can use the word even, we could see evidence of narcissistic traits, where, and then now the part of where he had no respect for authority. That part comes to parents, come to authority in general, didn't have respect for that. Always making sure, like, he's causing chaos. And his word is the one is final. What he says goes. If you go against him, just know you will struggle, you'll suffer in some way.
I see.
Yes, and then now another part was the drugs use, the substance use, which now would see the change of personality. The aggressive behavior comes way to extreme when he's under the influence, both alcohol and other drugs, which we really couldn't know, but some people even around the friends could tell us he was taking them. So that's when you see the aggressive behavior was very high. And at that time, you just step back. You don't confront him because you'd really get violent.
So how do we determine the difference between, I guess, what we would call mental health and mental illness? Because it sounds like you're describing mental illness.
So what I'm describing is mental illness, because for him, using in the field we use a manual. It's called Diagnostic Statistical Manual. That's what we use to diagnose mental illness, because they're regarded there. We have things like depression, we have anxiety disorders. For him, it was a mix of personality disorder and substance use disorder. So both of them. But the underlying thing was the personality disorder, which now contributed to these other illnesses. Now, when it comes to mental health, according to World Health Organization, they say it's a state of well-being where it's psychological, emotionally, socially, physically, and even spiritually. You're functioning in a healthy way, and where you can cope, you can be able to cope with daily life hassles. Because stress on a daily basis, that's normal. So if you can be able to cope with that normally, and you can be able to be productive in the society, in the community, not only that, even in support of the people around you. Now that's what we say, it's you're mentally healthy.
Sorry, let me just interject here with, I'd like you to break that down again slowly, because what it seems to me what you've said is that mental health is health.
Yes.
It's like mental health encompasses every aspect of health, but we tend to think that mental health sits on the side. I just want you to take us slowly through that event so that guys can pick that out.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so first of all they're totally different. We use them interchangeably, like we say mental illness, mental health, but they're different. So with mental health, you're saying complete state of well-being. Psychologically, you're well. You can function normally. Where even when you face, let's give an example, you're stuck in traffic and you're late for work. So you find that some people who really get stressed, people start shouting, and this is very normal.
I got hit by a bus yesterday.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, my whole lower back is killing me. Yeah. Oops. I think he was angry.
So you see, like there are these normal stresses we go through life. So if we can be able to cope them and still function so well in life, that we can say you're in a state of well-being. We're saying psychologically, physically, and we are looking at socially. You can interact with people. When you're alone, it's okay. You're in that state of well-being where it's a holistic, we look at it in a holistic way. We are looking at spiritually, we are looking. So that is what we call mental well-being. You can be productive in your work. That now we can say in your community, you're relating well with people, you're contributing positively in the community. That's state of well-being, that's mental health in general.
So it's very interesting because we often think about health in terms of the food you eat and going for a jog, and mostly it's like the physical aspect. It's only when you're physically okay and you're not in physical pain. I mean, mostly once we are done with that, we are okay. But do you reckon there are many people out there who are quote unquote physically okay, but they're not mentally okay?
Yeah, that is very true.
So with your definition though, is there ever an intersection between like mental health and mental illness? Like I actually did get hit by a bus yesterday, and like it's bothering my back and it's bothering me, and I know I'm dealing with stress and anxiety as a result. Like, is this going to last forever? Like, am I going to heal? Is there a place where so that's mental health, right? Is there a place where it tips and your mental health can be bad enough to where you have a mental illness? Does that work?
Yes, it works, because one thing is for you right now. Yes, you went through. Like it's a not say that traumatic event yesterday, but are you coping well? You can be able to function well. You're here right now. You can actually know what to do to prevent and even heal that. That you can say you're in a state of well-being. You're mentally well because you can actually be able to cope. Now, when it tips the other side is where you can't be able to function well, where it's affect you psychologically, emotionally, even your thought patterns have changed, where you find that sometimes you may even interpret what happened. You're like, it's my fault. There's something I did wrong for the accident. So you find you're blaming yourself. Now that's there we find something is not consistent here.
Yes.
Yeah, it's off. We need to. Why are you internalizing this as your personal responsibility and it's not your fault? So you're looking at your mood, because if now you're not mentally well, you could look at how that event affected you. Right now, maybe even at home, and can't even come to work. Now you find your brain, how you're interpreting the event, it's affecting your whole day, even your functioning, even you can't concentrate at work.
I see.
Yes, so that's why now we start looking at the challenges.
So what about like now in the case of Darren, because maybe that's what he's doing,
Yeah.
You just man up. You override it. Like when there is a little voice in your head telling you that was that accident, but you don't want to process it. You tell yourself, look, I have other things to do. So what happens if you keep doing that?
Okay, now that's one of the things which is, especially for men, that manning up, that of sailing through things, you don't have to show it. It's one of the difficulties of why people are not seeking help, because the society wants you to man up. You have to function, so block it, come to work. No one wants to see that vulnerability. The problem is the more you block it, the more it affects you, because as much as you're saying you're not thinking about it, trust me, it's there. The more you push it away, the more it's constantly in your mind.
So Darren needs therapy, right?
You need to tell I'm just kidding. Yeah, but now,
Because it's on his mind. It's constantly on his mind.
Yes.
He wants to go and beat up that bus driver. He's just not saying it.
I did. Yeah, you're right.
no, that's why we ask.
I fantasize that. Beating him up, yeah.
Now you see there's the normal way you get angry and then you let it go. But 2-3 weeks down the line, it's still obsessing over the matter. Now we get concerned.
Okay.
Yeah, there's the normal way how we are humans.
Yes.
When you're hurt, when something happens, that reaction, there's the normal reaction. But if it's constantly in your mind, you're fantasizing, and then it's obsessing, you're obsessing over it. Weeks down the line, it's still the same. Now we get concerned. Why is that event affecting you? How you processing? Now we look at how is your thought process about the event. So that's why we focus on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I suppose that also is a nice place to transition to the next issue I think we would like to address here, which is there's a sense that there's a crisis, a mental health crisis. That is my subjective assessment, but I would put it out there and ask, do you as a professional think that that is true? Is there a mental health crisis in Kenya? Is there a mental health crisis globally? Could you speak a bit?
As a non-professional, there is amongst Matatu culture. Sorry to bring up my bus story again.
Let it out. The conversation is there. So
But I guess the question is, in general, is there a mental health crisis?
yes, right now mental illness is a public health issue, because one thing is you're looking at after COVID, that's when we came to realize it's a crisis, because it brought out the issues which people haven't been talking about it for a while. We are looking at the one area which has brought it out is the workplace, because the productivity is being affected. The cost of treatment of mental illness is at a high. And now that is also affecting, we're looking at it's called GDP.
Yes.
Yeah, it's at a high even right now. So in general, there's a crisis right now. And the beauty of it is people are talking, but the more people are talking, the more issues are coming in. But now the challenge is our system ready to handle this crisis? Our health system.
So, what about in our social lives and our personal lives? Do you see the crisis manifesting, and how? Family life. I mean, could you describe your views or experiences around that?
One thing I know is the crisis is there, and the challenge is because we have always known how to cover it and mask it for the longest time, and then now the crisis is there. People don't have the right skills, even coping skills, to handle it. Then the reason why it's elevating, the cases of depression cases on the rise, anxiety issues on the rise, chronic stress issues on the rise. So all that, substance use, many Kenyans, we know how to mask a lot of that, but we have normalized that system of you're feeling you're not well, I can do something about it. So the crisis is there, and how we are masking it is preventing us from seeking help. We are not equipping ourselves with right skills on how to cope with this situation. So it's being elevated. And now it's coming up from, like, let's say, I will talk about workplace a lot because I work around that area a lot. You find many employers, you want productivity, you want results, but you don't care about the process at which this person is getting there. So the cases of burnout are there, the cases of attrition at workplace. Kenyans, you find in Kenya, people are desperate, you need the money. but the workplace is toxic. And now if you leave, you're looking at poverty crisis, economic crisis. It's there. So yes, it's at a crisis, but the problem is people don't know how to handle it, don't know how to cope with it. People don't know how to seek help and talk about it. And it's gonna get worse.
Is it, okay, so is it on the rise, or is it more diagnosed than it has in previous generations? Are things actually worse for humans in Nairobi, or are we just now have the tools to?
Are we more aware?
We are more aware. People are speaking more about it. And as I said, the pandemic really affected us economically.
Yeah.
The pandemic showed us where the challenge is. And now, as much as people are aware, they don't know what to do. So the tools are not there, not equipped. People are more aware, and now we are seeing people seeking help. And now we find in hospitals more recorded cases are there. So we can.
So you mean even like in the last 3 years, like it's because of
It has risen. We find within schools in terms of adolescents. Right now, there's the issue of suicide rates going high among adolescents, and depression cases on the rise. We are looking at issues of loneliness, which is one of the risk factors when it comes to depression. Yeah, these cases on the rise.
So are you saying the loneliness is sort of the why?
It's part of it. It's not the why. It's part of it.
Okay.
Because of the social exclusion. We find during pandemic, many people were isolated, and many people they lost touch, and we now sought the digital world to connect with people, but that's not enough. Yes. So, but now the moment we do that, you find now many people are finding solace within the digital world. They're becoming vulnerable in a space where you should not be really vulnerable, and it's affecting them even more. And now increasing that aspect of loneliness. So it's one of the risk factors when it comes to issues such as depression. Yeah.
So generally, it therefore affirms the position that indeed there's a crisis, and many of us need to pay a closer attention to mental health, and that we are not equipped with the life skills. But on the other hand, we also probably don't have enough support from our near and dear ones. They're probably facing the same things. And then the health system does not have enough resources to deal with the emerging trend.
Yes.
Which I think makes me then go again to something I believe in. Just much in the same way with COVID, we could predict that if we allowed for COVID to overwhelm us, the number of infections to overwhelm us, our health system would collapse, because the health system. So there was tremendous focus on prevention.
Yeah.
There were, everybody did everything they could to try and prevent, people from getting infected, and therefore overwhelming the health system, and then everything collapsing. And I wonder whether you would agree that that would be a good approach for mental health as well, is that we begin to focus a lot more attention on giving people the life skills, the education and life skills that would enable them cope. And then we have the people who are already undergoing, maybe who are already affected adversely. Then we can focus in terms of the resources, the ministry's resources or government resources or whoever is involved on assisting those people, and there's just a handful of them really, so it's probably manageable. I don't know whether that sort of picture would be an ideal way of approaching this.
Let me go back, at least look at the statistics just a little bit.
Yes.
First of all, globally, 1 in 4 people is struggling with mental illness. 1 in 4 people.
How many people are struggling with mental health?
Yeah. Now this is illness. Now we are looking at the most common ones. We are looking at depression. We are looking at anxiety. anxiety disorders, we're looking at substance use disorders, we're looking at bipolar disorders, we're looking at schizophrenia. Those are most of the common mental illnesses, although there are others. So globally, according to a World Health Organization, one in every 4 people. But in Kenya now, based on this research was done back in 2017, but there's recent research, but now that one showed 1 in every 10 people suffer from a common mental disorder, the ones I've just mentioned. And they said it increases with 1 in every 4 people among patients attending routine outpatient services. So we know in Kenya, these are things which people don't go seeking help. Sometimes when you go to these healthcare hospitals, looking at referral hospital, there's that screening. And the screening right now, some referral hospitals, they're screening for depression. There's mostly depression or any sign of mental illnesses. So if it's 1 in 4 people, how many people are in Kenya?
So who of you is depressed?
Yeah, so when you're looking, yes, when you look at globally, by the way, you look at globally, one in 4 people is struggling with mental illness.
Yeah.
But do we seek help? Do we even know we are struggling? That's the big challenge. Many people don't know they're struggling. You go read something and you're looking at symptoms, you're like, nah, I'm okay. So that now the diagnostic part of it is, have you gone to a mental health professional? You've been screened and they're saying, okay, you're struggling with depression, you're struggling with anxiety disorder, you're struggling with bipolar. Not many people go. People are like, I'm okay. So, and one thing we say, someone who is hurt, someone who is in pain, in some way you will end up hurting the people around you. So even your support system gets affected by the struggle of helping you. Look at the case that I was saying about my brother.
Yeah.
All of us got affected without knowing. For me, I went and thought, let me go find out what is wrong.
You turned it into a career.
Yes, I became my focus and hence even my specialization. So we find within the family we all struggle because one person is affected. So imagine a place where no one knows this person has a mental illness. Let's say even a personality disorder, which it's very hard for someone to go seek help. That family gets affected. And how they cope is another thing. Many people end up using very negative coping mechanism, which end up affecting them even worse because already you're vulnerable.
Yeah.
So it's
What's the most typical coping mechanism?
We have drug use. We have drug use. We have substance use. We have the currently even gambling. It's a way of even soothing.
Really?
It's becoming a crisis right now in Kenya. Gambling problem. We are looking at eating habits, overeating, others binge eating, others not eating. These are negative ways of which people cope, and they don't know they're negative. So you start as a way of an avoiding, an escape, and then it gets worse with time because you're trying to escape from a problem you can't understand. Yeah.
Yeah, I was reading recently that guys who will say like, I like to have a drink after work just to sort of calm my nerves, but even 1 or 2 cocktails makes you like something like 40% less able to deal with stress the next day. Like it actually makes it harder the next day. That's astonishing. I mean, because that's always that's what happy hour is. It's just like unwind because the day was so stressful, but you're literally apparently setting yourself up to have a worse day in terms of dealing with anxiety tomorrow.
Yeah, because this one is an escape. You're not really unwinding because you haven't processed what really happened. So tomorrow you escape today and tomorrow you go back to the same situation. Now it has escalated to a way of, okay, you're meeting it again. And now it continues piling. And for you, the escape becomes more and more because your tolerance levels are going up every time. So the amount continues increasing, but you haven't dealt with it. The problem is still there.
I have another question, which is in some ways related to that. Whenever I bring up the topic or an issue of mental health, what I see most people do is they remove themselves from that conversation and assume that matters mental health are for people who are mentally unwell, and they are not. And it happens almost instinctively. Everybody assumes they are okay. And therefore, you know, even when you're trying to discuss mental health, you're a bit of an oddball in that conversation. You sort of you're a party pooper, so to speak, isn't it? Now, but from this conversation, it does seem to me like if out of every 4 people, one of us is going through mental illness, there's also potential that the 3 who are okay are probably on the verge of mental illness, or maybe they are coping in ways which are they could tip over. They could tip over.
Like unsustainable.
It's not very sustainable. So I think the question I have is there need for each of us then to become more concerned about our personal mental health and the mental health of those who care about? If we are a parent, should you really pay attention to the mental health of your children? Should you really educate yourself about their mental well-being and your own mental well-being? Should we, or are we being, in other words, are we being very presumptuous that we are okay?
Everything, yes. And why I'm saying this is, this conversation I've been having about this thing called intergenerational trauma, where you find our parents went through trauma itself, and they had no idea the kind of trauma they went through. You're looking at the kind of independence, you're looking at economic crisis in their time, and they had no idea. Then come to now, as what is going on, we have no idea, so it comes to us. We're becoming even more sensitive to what is happening. And even as we're going through a challenge of its time, we have the pandemic, we're still going through economic crisis. So we carry that, and then we are talking about even divorce within our families. All these, it's childhood experiences. We call them adverse childhood experiences. And at the time, we have no idea we are going through them. So the more we do that, the people who are becoming parents right now, they are passing that along to their children, and they become more sensitive. Someone even said, why are our children why are they so sensitive? Why are they taking things, you tell them no, they react in a very, in extreme manner. Others, you tell them, I can't give you this, and the next thing they have decided to harm themselves. They're becoming more sensitive to what is happening, and they don't understand. So you find this, we need to educate ourselves, look at how was my childhood, how was my family, what happened to me, and how am I coping right now? Am I transferring this to my child? Am I transferring this to my partner? Dysfunctional marriages, we didn't know. Abuse, cases of gender-based violence, it's at an high level right now. And people don't know what's contributing to that. So all these we need to be aware, because one way or another, they are related to each other. If there is violence at home, that child, it's going to affect the child. Comes to studies at school, comes to relationship with others, comes to how then they internalize the kind of environment they've grown up to. So you find it's affecting their schooling, performance. You go to school, the teacher doesn't understand the situation at all. This child gets punished because of bad performance. More punishment. And already at home, there's chaos at home. Come to school, it's like I can't speak up. And the teacher is not taking time to understand. This child finds ways of soothing themselves. And that's why you find they end up in drugs, they end up in anything to soothe, to let it out, because one way or another, if you're going through any mental health challenges or your suppressed emotion, it always finds a way of coming out. And it comes out in how people are coping, the people they relate with. So this continues, this child gets into, after adolescence, after high school, get into university. The same continues, and then the same cycle continues because it has been normalized. That's why people say, why am I attracting people who are abusing me every time? Yeah, because for you it's familiar. You're used to seeing it. Your body has internalized this is the normal. No one has ever talked to me or allowed me to process the challenges I went through, the hurt I went through. So I attract someone who is familiar in a way of hurting you. And the cycle continues and continues. From relationship, from one generation to another. And that's the crisis now.
So you're saying the cycle can happen within yourself and your own relationships, but also through generationally, those macro and micro. How would you even know if you're in it? Like, is there a way before there's a crisis to act to to become aware that maybe you're dealing with something? I don't know.
Yeah, that's why we say if sometimes even you're not aware because for you you've normalized. That's normal. I've
Right.
seen what is happening at home. This is okay, that's how relationships. So for you internalize that. So when it gets to you and you realize something is off, let me go speak to someone. That's why even we encourage, go talk to someone, even a mental health professional, understand. And it doesn't need for you to be ill for you to go talk to someone.
Yeah.
You understand the dynamics at home, you realize. Sometimes I've had clients who come in and they're just, especially within a school setting, they're like, I'm very curious, what do you psychologists do? And
Okay.
the minute we sit down, we go through their brief history of life, and along the way, they're, oh, I didn't know this is where I've been behaving like this.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a way you can become aware of it.
Like, are there any like small red flags that help people get to that place where they become sort of self-aware? I mean, we know the big ones, like, but that are cries for help or tragedies or whatever. But are there little things that like the average person can go, ooh, maybe I do, maybe I should visit someone. What are they? Like,
Let me start because we're talking about relationship. You find yourself the kind of partners you're attracting. You end up, it's a cycle of the same breakups and the relationships are dysfunctional. You find now, ask yourself, because you're the commonality, you're the common factor in this.
yeah.
Where am I?
Every unsuccessful relationship has you in common.
Yes. So
Yeah.
why am I attracting this kind of person? That's a learn for you to check on yourself. What am I doing? What is doing within myself? I'm attracting this kind of person. And then another part you find all of a sudden you're losing even interest in things you like. You used to enjoy things and things to even enjoy time with people, but all of a sudden you're withdrawn. You're no longer enjoying things. You want to be by yourself. It's like there's a personality change. Ask yourself, what has changed? All of a sudden there's a diet change. You've been eating a certain way, and all of a sudden you've lost that. You just eating anything, the healthy lifestyle, you've abandoned it. Ask yourself why. Come to sleep patterns.
Okay.
You used to sleep well, and then all of a sudden you're not sleeping well. Other times you're either sleeping too much.
Okay.
Both of them, ask yourself, what has changed? What is happening? Yes. So these small red flags, it's something to ask yourself, what something has changed and I need to pay attention. It's a way of your body telling you, pay attention. All of a sudden you're having cases of flu, all of a sudden flu. After a few weeks, flu again. Ask yourself, because with high levels of stress, the immunity goes down. So there you're vulnerable. So something is going on. Your body is telling you, kindly pay attention to. Yes.
So diet changes, sleep pattern changes, in things that normally are enjoyable,
Yes.
and even health changes. Those are like, could be red flags that maybe they aren't what they are, but they are a signal
Yes.
that there's a mental health imbalance.
Yeah,
or
challenge.
Okay.
And take time to notice, what can I do about it? But now the first part is be aware. And then now next, what can you do about
well,
it?
because my instinct would be like, if I'm not sleeping well for several weeks, I'd be trying to fix my sleep. But what you're saying is, no, that could be a red flag to check on your mental health,
Yes.
because it may have a connection.
Could be, yeah.
Because I would just try to solve the problem at hand without knowing that these could be signals.
And then you see sometimes people change, you find, okay, let me try sleep more. But you find after a while, you're back again to the same. You're back again to the same.
So there's a pattern.
There's a pattern. So pay attention to that pattern.
So I have an interesting sort of interjection there, which is many of us when we were growing up and we felt something or thought something or observed something, we were often, and we tried to express that feeling, that emotions to our caregivers, parents, whoever. More often than not, they tell you, don't be silly, you can't be thinking that, you can't be feeling that. So you got to this place where half the time you were not sure about your own feelings. You kept invalidating your feelings because you wanted to comply with a certain, to fit in or to be more accepted or something. So over the years, you do that for a long time, you create some real disconnect between yourself and your feelings. Now, later on in life, when you observe these trends, what you would try to do for the longest time, for years even, is not admit to yourself that you're feeling what you're feeling. You would, because you often have to process your feelings through this thing that was installed in you as a child. So when your sleep patterns are off, you will never get to that point of saying my sleep patterns are off, and maybe it's because I'm unwell. I wonder whether then we are capable of being the best people to really see the red flags in our lives, to identify the red flags and see them for what they are because of those challenges of how we grew up. Yeah. What do you think
So
about it?
I'll identify your red flags for you, Charles. But actually, maybe that's it. Maybe it's friendships that allow you to go, hey, having enough close friendships where someone can say, hey, you may not notice this, but you haven't been eating the same, or whatever, and that could be a red flag.
Yeah.
Yes, and here's another challenge as well. I'll speak about me, for instance. Maybe because of some maladaptive, things I do, I probably have never been able to really establish close friendships. It's like I'm very guarded with people, and I guard my vulnerabilities. I think many people do that. So the front I present is always the perfect front. And if you want to speak to something like, Charles, you're not eating properly today, I'll find a reason to maintain that perfect front. I'll tell you, no, I just, I'm okay. And we cover it up and let's talk about the weather. I'll immediately deflect or move into a space where we're not discussing me. So maybe that also brings me to the next question, which is why is it so hard for us to talk about mental health or issues that relate to us? Because mental health is shining a big spotlight on your inner life, even to yourself. So forget me talking about my mental health with you. It is just me talking to me about my mental health. Why is it so hard?
I think don't you feel like it's like, people think it's like, either it's not there or it's extreme. Like they don't think of it as being mild or sort of okay. They think of like either I'm doing great or it's the schizophrenic on the street corner. And so when you bring up mental health, it's like, you're good, because you're not like the guy who drinks shampoo, And for ourselves, I'm guessing that's kind of what it is, because it seems scary.
Yeah, actually, you've both put it well, because for the longest time we have known when you talk about mental illness, you're thinking of that person who is walking around, maybe can beat you up or can chase you in the street, someone who's even homeless. So that's the kind of image we put when it comes to mental illness. So that part there's a stigma attached to that. Even speaking about it, by admitting, you're finding people label you as not productive. Let me use an example, another one in the sports world. When you come in and say you're struggling with something that shows your capacity to deliver in the field, you're not productive in the field. So meaning you'll be out of the team and not have time to play. So why should I go speak about it? Let me mask it. Come to workplace. When you come to that fear of, if I speak about it, my boss will see I can't deliver my productivity, and that can be used as a way of letting me go.
Yeah. Oh, that's huge, actually. That makes sense.
Yeah. So when it comes to even now, but now the image you have put about mental illness, we're thinking of that person. The way people used to say mental, yes, the name attached to it, there's a stigma attached. There's a study which was done in Western, and they were looking at Bungoma, Vihiga, Kisumu, and some of the issues people say was because of why people don't seek help. It's because even of fear of violence, of how even people are going to react towards you. There's the fear of, now there's a stigma, there's the taboo of it's witchcraft.
Right.
The community looking at you like, something is wrong for you, that family is cursed, so even associating with you. So that leads to social exclusion. You're not even involved in any activity. So, and that even now makes the situation even worse. So you'd rather be quiet, not speak about it.
That's a good point, because like you can imagine like in a workplace where if you break your leg, your boss might say like just go home like for a few weeks and just deal with this. But if you said like I'm just struggling with some mental things, it'd be like, okay, you can take a few days off, and you may not have the job when you come back, because people don't think of it as temporary. They don't think of it as solvable. They sort of think of it as like, it's going to end up drinking shampoo on the street corner, you know? And that's not the case. Like, you actually can have a small crisis and get through it and be totally okay, right?
Be back to normal. Actually, you admitting there's a challenge helps you even cope with it.
Yeah.
But the problem is how the image we have about when it comes to mental illness, that prevents people from speaking about it. So even you admitting, like, I'm going through something, that's the hardest of it all.
Yeah.
You yourself will become, because of the belief system of how we have been socialized, it's very hard to come in and say, yes, I'm struggling with this.
Yeah.
So even for us, it's how you've been socialized.
Well, there's a few things, like if you have a death in the family, everyone knows you're gonna just like, it's gonna be tough for a while. And so they kind of will like let you like, okay, you can take a couple of weeks off, we get that. That one's acceptable. I can't think of many other mental hardships that don't physically affect you that people will give you a pass about. Are there any other ones?
Actually, that is, and even that comes to grief. Even like one thing, let me use an example of my community is even during the day of the burial, that the expressing the grief and even crying, the people frown upon it.
Yeah, I've noticed that in Kenya. Like, it really depends what county you're in.
Yeah.
Yes.
Some counties is like, no, we have to cry. Like, we're gonna pay a guy to cry.
Yes,
And
we
then
need to let it
and in
out.
some places, it's just like, go get stoic, you know.
Yeah.
I remember on my dad's burial, someone just told me, I'm happy you didn't embarrass us by crying.
Yeah.
And this is my dad. This is someone who is very close. This is my father who was passed. And then just because you haven't cried, people are waiting for that to happen. So it's frowned upon.
Yeah.
And then after the death, it's like, can you get back to normal? So you're not given time to process the grief. Another challenge is, yes, the death has happened, but now processing this grief. As you're finding people have right now in DSM, it's being recognized as prolonged grief.
And what? DS?
We call it Diagnostic or Statistical Manual. So it's
what does that do? Is it
So
something
it's
about
It's your big book.
Yeah, it's a big book where it's a criteria for diagnosing mental illness.
Okay.
So where we find, if I'm assessing you, let's say I'm seeing symptoms of depression, it has to align by this criteria.
Okay.
It's internationally recognized.
This is the
DSM.
DSM.
So right now it's called DSM-5.
Oh.
Yes, so it goes on changing every time. So I just can't go at it because you've read on Google, I have depression and that's it. No, it has to fit a certain criteria, which is internationally recognized. So right now they've said, because of this challenge of these cultural things we have where the death has happened, back to work. Even the bosses is like, yeah, you've buried your loved one, back to work next week. But there's no room for you to process this grief. How has it impacted me? The loss not only of a support system, the loss maybe financially, the loss of, that process of that period of processing it, it's blocked.
So there must be some unique cases here in Kenya then, because what I said was true. It depends on what county you're from.
Yes.
Like, so you could have multiple people working in the same workplace that like they have dealt with grief,
Yes.
and someone else who just was never given permission to, even though they're otherwise looking at them, they're from an equal situation, whatever.
Yes.
And if you're a boss, you kind of need to be sort of cognizant to like, oh, hey, I know this guy's from so-and-so. They may need some time that
They
they will
need
give
some
them,
time.
you know?
Yeah, like I can say very well, aside, that one is locked, you're buried, back to normal.
Yeah.
And no time is given for that. It's that emotion part of it. Like, I remember on my side, many people are very uncomfortable when you talk about death, when you talk about how you're feeling. So your ends required to block it. But in my field, I can't allow myself to do that because I want to be able to work with my patients because the triggers are already there. So you find now the other cultures where they have months of grieving, where they talk about it, they cry about it, and they go through that cathartic process.
So let me tell you about
Yes.
my culture.
Uh-huh.
For us,
The lawyer culture?
Or the tribe. That's actually a point of concern. So which culture? Which culture?
the tribal way.
Okay.
So when someone dies, okay, firstly, I think we put a really, really big, we used to, let me be clear, but I think right now we're in a transition phase where a lot of the cultural norms are changing. So it's unclear as to what really holds true today. But in the past, I think there's a sense in which like life was held really sacred. At the passing of an individual, it was a big deal. The whole community would get involved. There would be maybe 2 or 3 weeks set aside for mourning the person. There would be serious resources mobilized around the whole burial ceremony and hanging out with the family for days on end. And after the burial, there would still be maybe 2 or 3 days of the community hanging out with you. And then there was also an interesting part, which we are the sort of guys who would even hire, just because we would want to esteem you at death.
Yeah.
We would hire professional mourners for
Yeah.
you. And, we would go down the street and they'll be chanting with twigs and,
Yeah.
there'd be a whole thing about your life. But then once you're buried, on the day, on that evening of the burial, there would be something called disco matanga.
The disco.
We missed that. Dennis and I went to a little funeral like a few months ago.
Yes.
But we didn't do that part.
Yes, he didn't do disco matanga.
We didn't stick around.
So what would happen during disco matanga? His guys would let loose. Guys would dance and dance and dance, and there'd be this sort of bittersweet thing going on, because it would be a celebration, but there's grief at the same time. And sometimes you'd find, for instance, if it is the widow of the deceased, she's also dancing there. And for other people who are not familiar with that sort of thing, they'd be appalled. They'd be thinking, come on, man.
Yeah.
What the heck?
Well, one of the guys was appalled that we I remember this, because the whole funeral party didn't finish burying the body. Like, they put some dirt on and then took off.
Yes.
But they were like, but we have to finish.
Yes.
So we have to keep, so it's like what we have set up in our head is what must happen in order to achieve grief is so different
It's
here.
very different.
That's why you have to be careful, understand the culture you're coming from. Even when you're assessing a client, you just don't look at your symptoms. You need to look at the holistic, culturally, the family. What are your belief system for us to understand your interpretation of what you're going through? That's how we get to understand you. So you see, like that one. I also attended one. And for me, I'm like, this is a place where they were sharing memories, where they're not only
great.
the sad ones, the good memories, and you could find the family felt, even the close family members, they felt, yes, we have a support system, and then dancing. So some of us, we are locked into the loss. We focus now after the grief, you're focusing so much on the loss. And later, you don't have time to even look at what are some of the good memories we shared. Can we look at them? But no. That comes way later. But these ones, it's different. It's there.
But I think to get sort of back to what we were talking about before, was that there is at least acknowledgement throughout humanity that grief is an acceptable form of mental health that has an ebb and a flow.
Yes.
Are there any other things that we sort of accept as being okay? Because it doesn't feel like there's many.
No, it's not many, because when you look at even physical illness, when even cancer comes to diabetes, comes to even HIV, these are things which
we tolerate.
Yes.
We get it.
And then
we know
whatever
that.
comes, the psychological issues which comes attached to this, now that is acceptable there. But now, when you don't have an existing medical condition,
Okay, so medical induced depression, we also kind of get that.
that one is gotten there. But now others, like, and let me put one which even talking about is a problem, gambling problem. Right now, you go tell your boss, I've gambled on my money, and even, let's say even you're an accountant at workplace, and you've used the money meant even for work.
Well,
that
that's a
is
problem.
a sign for being let go immediately.
Yeah.
But now coming to acknowledge, like, this is a problem, this is a disease.
So self-control
Yes.
issues are definitely not cool with anybody, right?
Yes, but now no one sees, like, this is an impulse control problem. This is a disorder. This is a problem which needs medical attention. This is just not someone deciding right now. This is a lifestyle issue.
I don't know anything about it. Is something like that as temporary, is potentially temporary as grief that is handled well? I mean, can you handle impulse control, mental health issues as healthily and as seamlessly as you can the medical induced or grief induced?
Everybody's different.
Right.
Everybody, we can say, let's say all of us have been diagnosed with depression. It's all different based on how the family situation, psychologically, genetically, what you've been predisposed to. So we can say there's a certain way. There are people you go within 3-4 sessions, they're functioning so well.
Yeah.
They're back to normal, even some they don't need medication.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
We have others where you have to go through medication, you have to take the medication, and others it's long term. So we have others, people come for sessions even at most 6 sessions, and they are coping. They just come in to check in after months. They're like, okay, I've been doing this, I've faced a hiccup, I can function. The one thing is we bring this person to normal functioning. But there are others where it's long term. You're in care. Like it's like something like even depression. We call it major depressive disorder. And that's now you find you're in, it's more of a chronic illness like diabetes.
Right.
So you're in medication for long term. So you find you're in care.
Stay tuned as we continue this conversation with Rodhah Kithure, a clinical psychologist, in part 2 of this series.